you can keep the grooving going after the music ends. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I know we've got a lot of familiar kids here with us today, which is awesome. Welcome back to our program. If you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And the month of February is our favorite month of the year. So now every February, since we were founded back in 2015, we've spent the entire month solely showcasing incredible women in science and exploration around the globe. I think we've done 55 programs this month. It's been a little bit crazy in 28 days. So thank you for continuing to join us. We've had astronauts, cave divers, zoologists, so many incredible women from around the globe. And we are wrapping it up with today's awesome program. So welcome in. Now, a few months ago, I got involved as the Nature for All Canadian coordinator. I really encourage all our classes to look this up because Nature for All is sort of a linkage of all the great nature groups in the world working together to make sure that kids like you and the general public generally are inspired and excited that they can fall in love with nature. Now, one of my very favorite groups I had the chance to meet through this role is Sea Smart. Sea Smart is out in BC. I know we've got quite a few BC classes today. And since 2016, they've reached 500,000 people with amazing education programs inspiring people about the magic of the oceans. There are so many incredible species in the seas. The seas make up a huge percentage of the whole total planet. We are really on a blue planet. And so today we are going to hear from Fiona, education lead at Sea Smart, telling us a little bit about all the amazing work that they do and about the Salish Sea, a particularly special ecosystem off the coast of British Columbia. So without further ado, welcome into all our classes. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here today and to share with you some information about the Salish Sea and the waters that make up the Salish Sea, but also the water that is around all of you in your own hometowns and what we can do to help make sure that we keep it nice and safe and clean for the use of both people and animals. So before we really dive in today, I want to quiz you all. So my very first question for you today is, what percentage of the surface of planet Earth is covered in water? I'll give you some options. Do you think it's 53%, 62%, or maybe 71%? So this is the percent of the surface of the Earth covered in water.
So we've got our 5 classes live with us. We've got groups joining in on YouTube. If you guys want to type in the chat bar in StreamYard or YouTube, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to give you guys a hint in advance of the Kahoot later that maybe you want to keep track of your answer for this one. Okay, what are our answers coming in, Fiona? Most think 62. So we got some thinking 71. Miss Brown's class thinks 71. Okay, no one's going for 53 so far. I mean, this picture you show certainly looks like a lot of ocean. We got this big chunk of the Pacific there, Atlantic. Any other answers? Get those in with us. I don't know. Let's see. Fiona. Oh, another C. So 71 is our biggest pick so far. What is it,
Okay.
Fiona?
Well, it sounds like the majority of you have it correct then. 71% of our beautiful blue planet is covered in water. And this is going to be important as we move through our lesson today. But I just wanted to primer with this. Now I'll introduce myself and Sea Smart a little bit. So, of course, Jesse mentioned, my name is Fiona. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the program coordinator for Sea Smart. And Sea Smart is a charity based out of Vancouver, and our goal is to bring information and education to learners of all ages to help them make positive and lasting changes for the oceans. And today we're going to do that by learning a little bit about the water around us and what impacts we might have on that water that can impact the ocean as well. So if you don't know, maybe you're not from Canada or you're not from BC, but Vancouver is where this little purple dancing star is, so right down here by the United States border. And it is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. This includes the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And I am so excited that I get to live and play and work here in Vancouver and on these traditional territories because they're so exciting, interesting, and diverse. So in this purple box you see here is a really important feature of Canada called the Salish Sea. And the Salish Sea encompasses 2 different kinds of water. So the marine inland water, salt water, of the Strait of Georgia, the Strait of Juan, Fuca, and Puget Sound down in Washington, as well as the fresh water that feeds into them. So we're going to be talking mostly about fresh water today, but in the Salish Sea, both of these kinds of water are important, and help to expand the diversity, the biodiversity, and the awesome habitats that exist in the Salish Sea. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about both saltwater and freshwater. So I have a question for all of you. What is the key difference between freshwater and saltwater? Again, I'll give you some options. So is it 1, freshwater comes from glaciers and saltwater does not? 2, freshwater is clean enough to drink and saltwater is not? Is it 3, saltwater contains salt and freshwater doesn't? Or 4, saltwater has whales in it and freshwater doesn't? What do we think?
All those whales, what do we think? Okay, guys, feel free to jump in with this one. I have an inkling that maybe it's in the name, but you guys can type in the chat. Let us know what you think. I know we've got a wide audience today. Welcome into all our teachers. Miss Brown, Miss Quigley, I know you guys were able to join us after we got underway. Mr. McLean, welcome in on YouTube. So Miss Gilman's class thinks 3 and 1, so glaciers as part of it as well. Mix of 3 and 4, the properties of the properties and life both matter, so that whales are in salt water, not in fresh water. Very good. Miss Quigley's class just straight 3. Great job, guys. Okay, if you've got everyone's got 3, and a few people have added 1 and 4. No one thinks the dirty thing at all. Just get rid of that number 2 whatsoever.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think you're all right. So all of these things may be true, but the key difference, the main difference, of course, is that salt. So ocean water is 3.5% salt. So that's like if you had a cup of water and you put 2 teaspoons of salt in it. That's about how salty the ocean typically is on average. And freshwater is usually less than 0.1% salt. So there's very little salt in freshwater. And this is super important because there's lots of different things that use and live in freshwater compared to ocean water that's really salty. So where can we find fresh water? Well, there's lots of different places we can find fresh water. Of course, saltwater tends to be in places like the ocean, but freshwater is in quite a few different places. So we can find freshwater in glaciers and frozen in polar ice caps. We can find it in rivers and lakes. We can even find it deep underground in those water tables or groundwater, or even just saturating the soil. And of course, we can find it in the atmosphere. Living here in Vancouver, I am a little bit annoyed of this atmospheric rain and haze and fog, but it is a really important source of fresh water as well. So there's lots of different places we can find fresh water, and there's lots of different reasons that fresh water is important. So I'm once again going to ask you to type in the chat why you think fresh water is important. So how do you use fresh water every single day?
Okay, so yeah, feel free to type in the chat. While you guys are doing that, YouTube and StreamYard alike, I'll note for me, I have a glass of water with me every one of these broadcasts. I'm always drinking fresh water. I know when I brush my teeth, I use fresh water, having a shower. These are some examples that work for me. I'm in an apartment building, so I have no lawns to water, no gardens to water. But maybe if you guys are at home, that might apply to you. Drink, shower, clean. Great job, Miss Quigley. Drink and water plants. So if we have plants maybe around the house, in the garden, that's a great way. Stay hydrated. I'm glad you guys are I'm glad everyone is staying hydrated in our classes today. It's very important. Water is essential to life. Farmers, we've got Miss T. Way to go, guys. Thinking about this broader thing. And our pets and fish. Fiona, all these great options.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like you've covered almost everything that I thought of as well. So, of course, some animals live in fresh water that can't live in salt water. We water our crops and our plants with it. One thing that I thought of is hydroelectricity. So moving water can power dams that can produce electricity for us. And of course, drinking water, cleaning, and things like that. If we were to drink a big glass of salt water, we would feel sick at least, and we would probably still be thirsty. And all of the animals that drink fresh water feel the same way about salt water as well. So fresh water is super important. But one more question for you quickly is, what percentage of the water on Earth is fresh water? So thinking about how much water is on the planet, 71% of the Earth's surface, how many different places we can find fresh water, and how important fresh water is. Do we think that there are the water on Earth, 3% is fresh water, 10% is fresh water, 30% is fresh water, or 50% is fresh water?
I was doing little hand signals. I'm not going to go up to 50. You'll have to assume that I'm doing it 5 times. What do we think, guys? YouTube viewers, I know we're a few seconds delayed, so I want to give you guys a quick second. We had some great answers for our last question on YouTube as well. StreamYard, some think A, some think D. That's very different. I like that. C, okay. So far, again, the second option you keep giving, Fiona, no one's picking it. No one wants 10. No one wants the fresh, the dirty. Changing to C with peer influence, peer pressure for the win. A, I like this. So, okay, C is our most popular answer. We've got some A's, we've got some D's as well. What is it?
Okay, well, on Earth, only 3% of the water is fresh water. So even though we can find it in so many places and it's so important, not very much of the water on Earth is fresh water. Most of the water on our planet is salt water in our oceans. And only 0.5% of Earth's water is accessible or usable fresh water. So that means about 16% of the fresh water on planet Earth is usable or accessible. And by that, I mean that there's some water we can use and some water we can't use. So fresh water we can use can be found in shallow groundwater that we can access with wells, in lakes, in the soil moisture, and in rivers. But fresh water we can't use or access can be found deep underground, in glaciers or polar ice caps where we'd rather it be frozen than liquid so that it can help control our climate. And of course, water in the atmosphere is really hard to use as well, unless it comes down as precipitation. So of all the water that is on planet Earth, only 0.5% of it is usable fresh water. And of course, we are starting to cause some problems for our usable fresh water through pollution. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is water pollution and what we can do to help reduce or prevent it. And today I'm breaking water pollution down into 3 big categories. But to begin, I would like to tell you that pollution is anything that enters an ecosystem and can cause harm to living things. So this can be plants or animals, even humans can find pollution that causes harm to them. But we're going to talk about 3 big broad categories today, so that we can break it down into smaller pieces and making changes in our own lives a little bit easier. So the first category we're going to talk about today is toxic chemicals. So toxic chemicals are anything that can cause harm to an organism, so a plant or an animal, and they enter the water in a few different ways. So they can directly enter the water from runoff, from factories, or things that people do in their own lives. They can run into storm drains accidentally. So you see in this picture a little oil spill that's going into the storm drain. And of course, these storm drains lead directly to rivers, which can flow down to oceans or to big lakes. They can enter the water accidentally from chemicals that are left out in things like pet waste. They can enter in our sewers, through our toilets, our showers, and our sinks, through chemicals that we use to clean. And of course, they can enter accidentally when we put things down the drain that we don't realize have chemicals in them that can impact the water. So things like medicine and pharmaceuticals. But toxic chemicals are mostly a big problem because of this thing called biomagnification. So biomagnification is something within a living organism, a plant or an animal, and it's being concentrated as it moves up the food chain. So as an example, we'll use this picture here. So represented by these little purple triangles, you can see that these phytoplankton, or tiny plants, have a little bit of this chemical toxin in them. And of course, as we move up the food chain, these little zooplankton, or tiny floating bugs, need to eat a lot of these phytoplankton to feel full and get the nutrients they need. But as they eat a ton of phytoplankton, they're getting a ton of that toxic chemical in their bodies as well. And as we move to this larger insect, it has to eat a bunch of those zooplankton to feel full and get the nutrients it needs. But with all those zooplankton come a bunch of chemicals. And of course, this fish at the tippity top of the food chain here has to eat a bunch of these insects to feel full and get the nutrients it needs. And that chemical continues to build up in this fish's body. And this continues up the food chain as we get to large animals like killer whales and sharks, and even humans. So biomagnification is this increase in concentration of toxins up a food chain. And these toxins don't leave these bodies. They continue to persist and grow until it becomes a really big health hazard for these animals. So we can do a few different things to help reduce the number and percent of toxic chemicals in the water near us. So something that I like to do is make sure I bring all my expired or unused medication back to the pharmacy and give it to those pharmacists. They'll dispose of it properly so it doesn't end up in the environment, either through the water or just passively in the environment as well, getting ingested by animals. We can also make sure that we're using natural cleaning products. So in this picture, you see lemons, you see baking soda and vinegar, and all of these things can clean just as well as those like Lysols and bleaches that we might be using. Of course, with things like the coronavirus, we want to make sure we're using things that can actually kill viruses. But in just everyday cleaning, using things like acids and bases like baking soda and vinegar works really well. And we can also make sure that we are using homemade insecticides, so things that don't contain a lot of toxic chemicals, on our gardens in places outside where running off into the water is something that's likely to happen. So there's kind of a list of things here, but basically just using natural deterrents for insects, like spicy things or yucky tasting things like garlic, to help insects not eat our plants. The next pollutant we're going to talk about is one that surprises me. It's excess nutrients. So of course, we'll break this down into a few different parts. So excess means too much or more than what is needed. So for example, if you were to eat 6 slices of toast for breakfast, you're probably feeling pretty good after the first 2. So those extra 4 would be excess pieces of toast. And nutrients is a substance or something that's important for growth and life. So this is something that we eat in all of our meals. Nutrients come from plants like vegetables, fruits, from lots of different food groups. But in excess, nutrients can be an issue, especially if they get into an ecosystem where they don't necessarily need to be for the proper functioning of that ecosystem. So too many nutrients can be a bad thing. And that's because they can cause what's known as a dead zone. So in this diagram, essentially what's happened is a farmer has fertilized their field. They've put fertilizer on to help those plants that they're growing grow really big and strong so that they can feed lots and lots of people. But not all of this fertilizer is absorbed into the plants. They don't actually take up all of that fertilizer. Some of it gets rained on and runs off into the water. And when that happens, the algae that's in the water, so all those little plants, grow really fast and really big. So that's what the fertilizer is meant to do, but not in the water. So this algae grows big and strong and it starts to block out the sunlight. So all of the plants at the bottom of the water start to die. And they're not producing a ton of oxygen because they're dead. So that's a problem in general. But eventually, all of that excess nutrient runs out. And the algae that's formed on the surface of the water starts to die and sink. And as it decays, it uses a ton of oxygen that's in the water in that process of decay. So breaking down, it uses oxygen. And then there's not enough oxygen in the water for things like fish and other plants. So they start to suffocate and die as well, which uses more oxygen. So this starts a loop of using oxygen and not replacing that oxygen, which can create what's known as a dead zone. And we see these dead zones in big coastal areas like along the coasts of the United States and Canada. And they're really hard to recover because once the oxygen is gone from the water, it's a really slow process to get it back. So making sure that the fertilizer doesn't run off into the water is really important. But there's also things we can do in our own lives to make sure this excess nutrient doesn't end up in the water. So making sure we aren't fertilizing our gardens right before a rainfall, that's something that's fairly easy to do. But we can also make sure that we aren't eating a ton of meat. So animals like cows eat really nutritious diets because farmers want them to grow big and strong too. so that they make really good meat for humans to eat. But the more meat that we eat, the more cows there needs to be. And as they poop and fart, they're letting all of this excess nutrient that they didn't quite digest and absorb back into the ecosystem. And this can run off into water too. So if we reduce the amount of meat that we're eating, we're reducing the amount of cows that exist in the world, and we reduce the amount of excess nutrients that's being produced in their poop and their farts. We can also make sure that we're using detergents like laundry soap and dish soap that don't contain nutrients. So phosphorus is a really big nutrient in lots of detergents. And if the bottle or the packaging for your detergent says phosphorus free, you're good to go. The final pollutant we are going to talk about today is plastic pollution. So this is a really big issue on our planet for both our freshwater and the oceans like the Salish Sea. And I'm sure most of you have heard about plastic pollution and started taking steps to reduce plastic consumption in your own life. But plastic pollution is a problem for a few surprising reasons. So not only does it make ecosystems look pretty bad, it makes our beaches covered in plastic, but it can also pose a really big threat to the animals that live in the water. So primarily, plastic isn't nutritious, but it is filling. So we see animals like this guy here eating plastic. We also see lots of sea turtles that ingest plastic, thinking it looks like their favorite food, the jellyfish. And it fills up their bellies, but it doesn't provide the nutrients that they need to get big and strong. Instead, it would be kind of like us eating popcorn for every meal of every day. We feel super full, but we're not going to get big and strong because popcorn doesn't contain a lot of the things that we need. Second, plastic is a toxin sponge. This maybe seems like a good thing. Sure, all that plastic in our ocean is going to absorb all of the toxins we just talked about. But then it gets eaten by animals like this fish, and those toxins are released into the tissues of its body. And following that process of biomagnification becomes a problem. We also know that plastic is durable and abundant. Its durability is why it's such an important thing for humans to have and use, but it also means it doesn't break down in the environment into pieces that can be absorbed and used in more helpful ways in the environment. Instead, it just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, and then there's more and more pieces of plastic that get eaten by animals. And plastic can also entangle animals. So I'm sure you've all seen pictures of those 6-pack rings that come on your soda and a little fish getting stuck in there. That can be a big problem with a lot of plastics because it isn't super stretchy. It does tend to get tangled into knots. So if you think about if you put your headphones in your backpack, they might get tangled into a big knot. The same thing happens with plastic in the water. And then animals like sea turtles or sea lions can get all stuck in that plastic and become entangled, which can reduce their ability to move and find food. Fortunately, there's tons of really awesome things we can do in our own lives to reduce or prevent plastic pollution in the water. So one of the easiest things, and my favorite things that people can do, is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I'm sure you've all heard of these 3 R's before, and I'm sure most of you are even practicing them. But I have a question for you. Which of the 3 R's has the biggest impact on reducing plastic pollution? Is it reduce, reuse, or recycle?
So many great questions, and you guys have been like the best audience ever today at being on board with all these things. So I've got a pretty good inkling on this one. I'm really curious. Say with elementary, Miss Allie's class says reuse. A lot of people saying recycle. This is really interesting because yeah, okay. Any others? Take your time. We've got 8 classes joining live, which is awesome. Recycle, or reuse. So I'm gonna throw my answer in the thing. I think A. I think it's reduced because the fewer things you're using, the less problem you have about having to reuse them or recycle them.
Fantastic. Well, Jesse, you got it correct. Everyone else, the other 2 steps are super important as well, but there is a reason that the 3 R's are in this specific order. So reducing the amount of plastic that you're bringing into your life, that you're using, that is the most important step in reducing plastic pollution. So reducing how much plastic we use is the primary step that we need to take. Reusing the plastic, also fantastic. So filling up one of those plastic water bottles before you recycle it is a really good way to cut in half the number of plastic bottles that's being produced and used. But never using that plastic bottle in the first place is the best way to completely eliminate the need for those plastic bottles. Of course, recycling can give things a new life, and that's really important as well because it reduces how much new plastic is being produced. But recently, I also learned that there's 2 additional R's that we can learn as well. So repurposing, the things that we have in our life is an important thing that we can do as well. So you might have heard of upcycling or making crafts out of recycling. Those are both really good ways to reduce how much plastic is entering the environment, but also refusing. So if you go to, say, a restaurant and they say, would you like a plastic straw? Saying no is a really good way to make sure that that plastic straw doesn't enter the environment. We can also make sure that we're using alternatives to plastic, so things like canvas shopping bags, not using disposable cutlery, and sitting down for dine-in food rather than getting takeout in a plastic container. These are all really good things we can do to reduce how much plastic is being created and entering our environment. Okay, so I know we talked about a ton of threats to our fresh water today, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but there's lots of awesome actions we can take as well. So behind each of these images, I'm going to share with you an action that I think can help us reduce water pollution, but I'm going to give you the option to also think of your own and choose that as well. But once I reveal all 9 of these actions, what I would love for you to do is choose one and make a commitment to trying to do that item or that thing in the next week. And that way we can all make a change for the water around us. So to begin, to reduce toxic chemical pollution, we can return our expired and unused medication to a pharmacy rather than flushing it down the toilet. We can use eco-friendly or homemade cleaning products to reduce how many toxins are entering the environment through our cleaning products. And we can report or clean up spilled oil so we can prevent it from entering our water and entering the environment through our storm drains. We can also make sure we're always picking up pet poo. So if you have a dog that goes outside and poops, making sure you're picking that up before it rains or it snows so that it doesn't wash those toxic chemicals or excess nutrients into the water. To help prevent dead zones from excess nutrients, we can make sure we're using phosphorus-free detergents. So our dish soap and our laundry soap, making sure those packages read phosphorus-free, and making sure we're fertilizing not right before a rainfall. And of course, to reduce plastic in our water, we can try reduce, reuse, and recycle, as well as refuse and repurpose, all of those R's we learned about today. We can bring reusable shopping bags to the store, and we can use alternatives to plastic. So all of these things are commitments we can make and take in the next week. But I would love for you now to take 1 minute to comment in the chat which of these things or which of the things that we learned about today or that you can think of you would like to commit to trying in the next week.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing your answers in the chat. One thing that you talked about in one of your slides, a few slides back, is this idea of not using stuff if you don't have to, refusing. And so one of the big things that certainly I uphold here in Canada, and for a lot of our audience today in Canada and the States, is that most of the places in our 2 countries, the water that comes out of your tap is very safe to drink. And so one of the things that you often see when you go to grocery stores is people coming out with huge things of bottled water. There's very few places in Canada and the US that you actually need bottled water. And if there's a basically free, unlimited supply of clean water that can come out of a tap, that's something you can really make a big dent in preventing plastic waste with. We've got our Miss Allie's class, pick up pet poo. There's Miss Quigley's classes, call to action and reduce, reuse, recycle. Very good, guys. Some of these are a little bit trickier. Not many of you are going to run into cleaned up spilled oil anytime soon, I don't think, but a great option nonetheless. And again, the nice thing with these solutions is that they're applicable at any scale. They're applicable around the world. eco-friendly or homemade cleaning products are very easy to find at most stores now, so that's something that we can all do as well. Let's see our YouTube answers. A lot of reducing, reusing, recycle. Talk about something that, even when we were kids in school, Fiona, this was like a big deal, and I'm so glad it's carried on with such popularity to today.
Awesome. Well, I'm super glad to hear that lots of you are committing to these things that you can do in the next week. These are really awesome things that will make a true difference to the clean water around you and even the oceans like the Salish Sea. So I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for committing to an action. You have all made a difference for the clean water around you and have become clean water champions. So that's fantastic. That's all the information I have for you today. I'm really excited to hear what questions you have and to see how you do on the Kahoot. And of course, if you want more information about any of the things I talked about today, you can visit our website. We also have online courses and programs for teachers to book for their schools, summer camps, events, resources like coloring pages. So there's lots of things there for you to access as well. So I'll hand it back over to you, Jesse.
Well, thank you so much for that. Feel free to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation. I will bring up the Sea Smart School website again many times throughout this broadcast, give you guys a chance to keep the learning going. But as Fiona mentioned, let's head to that Kahoot, see how much you guys are paying attention. Now, again, you don't win anything, but you do win Fiona and I's everlasting respect if you win the Kahoot. And for those who might be new to this, the faster you answer, the more points you get. Let's get this going in a few seconds. I know some of you are pouring in, which is great. Our game pin is up on the screen. We are going to get going in just a sec. And then I know several of you already have been sharing questions, which is awesome. And Fiona, we've got classes talking about all the amazing things they're doing to protect the oceans and protect the world, which is the best possible end to any one of our programs. So way to go, classrooms. Let's dive in with this, folks. In our YouTube classes, please feel free to share questions as well. Fiona, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Excellent. Right. I'm so excited.
Ooh, okay, 3, 2, 1 till our first question. Everyone can play along on YouTube as well. If you don't have Kahoot in your classes, you can just do it as well. Question 104. The Salish Sea is fresh water. Wow, people are very quick to answer this one. Oh, how much were you paying? It was way back when we've been talking about pollution. We've been talking about solutions. Back to the Salish Sea at the very beginning. Dun, 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 dun. I won't do the whole song or else I'll be nailed for copyright. No. 32 answers in so far. What do we think? So, 50-50 split. False. It is ocean. We've got an outlet of that wonderful Pacific Ocean on our west coast. Great job, Classy Yak. You're the classiest. And our current leader. All right, multi-select. So this means that there's more than one answer to pick. So what are some creatures that live in or around the Salish Sea? Orca, bald eagles, salmon shark, Atlantic puffins. One answer so far. People are really thrown off by this. We're testing them. I know we didn't dive in with animals too much today. I want to see what you guys think. We've got some BC classes today. I hope you guys get some of these. So our answers are all the first three. Now, bald eagles tripped a lot of people up. Bald eagles is a terrible spelling, and that's because I was too tired when I made the Kahoot. But yeah, Atlantic puffins. They're out in the East Coast. No Atlantic puffins in the Pacific, but the rest of them are there. And everyone should look up salmon sharks because they look like a domesticated great white shark. And
they're so cute.
They're fantastic. Fuzzy possum takes her lead. Okay, our quiz. What percentage of the Earth is ocean? We did this. This is your moment to remember back to earlier in the broadcast. Okay. 25, 50, 70, or 100. You are underwater right now. Like all of you. You just didn't know. 8 more seconds. Fiona. What is it? What do we think? I know a few of you thought it was 53 in our first quiz, but most of you got that right. That's like the highest percentage of a right answer in the history of our Kahoot. Way to go, guys. It is 71%. All right, Fuzzy Possum retains lead, a big lead actually over Hero New. Okay. Why is plastic pollution a problem? Toxin sponge, durable and abundant. It can entangle animals. We talked about the 6-pack rings, or all of the above. Now, for any of you who've ever joined me for a Kahoot before, you may know that I am very fond of a particular kind of answer when I throw it into the thing. Only 38 of you have done this so far. Hurry up, 1 more second. Oh, okay, what's the answer? All of the above. So yes, it is all those other things. It's important to note that. But we talked about, and in fact, there's more than we could possibly fit in one Kahoot. There are lots of things that make plastic pollution a problem. It sort of behooves us all to do a lot, anything we can to help prevent it from getting into the oceans in the first place. All right, Fiona, here's our leaderboard. Soaring Tiger third. If you are any of these people, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Fuzzy Possum number 2, and winning barely, with 2 out of 4. It was a tricky one. Awesome Falcon wins our Kahoot today. Way to go, Awesome Falcon. All right. Let's dive in with questions. I'm going to head to Miss Gilman's class to kick us off. Miss Gilman's class is so many groups today. This is very exciting. Joining us today in Manitowoc. Welcome in grade 5, 6s, and take us away. Come on up and unmute your mic. 5, 6s. Hello. Yes, you. Hi. Come unmute your mic, though. You know what? I'll come to you guys in a second, so you have time to unmute that microphone. We'll go to Miss T's class joining us in Surrey while we're waiting. Come on in, guys. Hi, grade 3 champs. Hi.
When did it become formally called the Salish Sea? Okay, that's a good question. Come on up.
Yeah, when did it become the Salish Sea, Fiona?
Really good question. So it was fairly recently, and it's to recognize that the Coast Salish people have been here for time immemorial. But it was also to help us to recognize that the Salish Sea isn't bound by the Canada-US border. It does go both on the Canada side and the United States side as one continuous body of water. I don't have the exact year, but I think it was like within the last 2 decades.
What a unique question. We've never had a question quite like that in any of our broadcasts ever. Good job, guys. Way to try and stump Fiona. Just kick us off. All right, let's head to Sayward Elementary. Miss Allie's class. If you want to unmute your mic for your 2 3s, that would be great. And come on in.
We've revised our question with listening to you. Now we're most curious why the fish might think that plastic is food.
That's a really good question. So sometimes plastic can smell like food. If it was a food container, it might still have that food smell on it, but it also might just look like food to them. So if they're used to eating things like small insects or plants, they might see these bits of plastic floating on the top of the water and think, wow, that's a pretty cool looking plant, and then go and take a bite and ingest that plastic. But it could also be the only thing in the ecosystem that they think is there for them to eat. So if it's there and they're really hungry, they might just go take a chomp just because it's not running away from them.
Yeah, great question, guys. Miss Brown, Miss Quigley, feel free to unmute your mics. Miss Gilman, too. You guys can all keep your mics unmuted in StreamYard. It makes it a lot easier. But let's head to London to Miss Brown's class. I think we have had every classroom in London, Ontario in our broadcast. Like, you guys are like the best city ever. Welcome in, Miss Brown. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Do you have a question for Fiona?
Who's that? Sam, do you want to go? Come here.
Come on up. Hello.
Hello.
I have a question for you. Why did you want to be who you are today?
Yes, a personal question, Fiona.
Oh my gosh, I didn't quite hear. What was it?
Oh, yeah. Why do you want to be who you are today? Like, how did you get into this role? What led you to it?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my journey it was pretty weird and long, but basically when I was in university, I loved science and I wanted to be a teacher. But as I was working when I was going through university, I started working for a park and telling people about dinosaurs. And I loved teaching people outside and teaching people about science outside of a classroom and bringing this information to them in a way that they could understand. And now I get to learn all about the ocean and share with people about the ocean. And it makes me so happy. So that's why I do what I do today. Awesome question. Thank you.
That's a very nice, guys. And by the way, dinosaurs to ocean is a really great, career trajectory. It's like awesome and then equally awesome. You have a good time no matter what. Way to go. Let's head to Miss Quigley's class. Join us in Chatham. Hi, guys. Welcome in.
How much water in the world do you think is not polluted?
Ooh.
That's a really good question. So unfortunately, I don't think it's a lot of the water in the world that's not polluted. Probably the least polluted water is our deep groundwater or the water perhaps in our atmosphere, although we do find pollution there too. But I read a really scary stat recently that every single beach on planet Earth has plastic pollution on it. So unfortunately, I do think a ton of our water on Earth is polluted. So do what you can to reduce and prevent that pollution.
And that's the nice thing about plastic pollution, honestly, is that it's a topic that no one looks at a beach covered in plastic and goes, great. Like, we all recognize that this is a big problem. This is something that's happened in the last, 60, 70 years, really largely, as plastic pollution as an issue. And so it's really important that we all take as many actions as we can to prevent that. Because we've had broadcasts where they talk about the bottom of the deepest ocean in the world, and there's plastic there. We've gone to the most remote islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with nothing around them for 5,000 kilometers, and there's plastic all over the beach. And so that's a big problem. We recognize that, and so I'm really glad we got that question as quick as fast. All right, guys, time flies when you're having fun. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to head to Ms. Gilman's class. If you guys do want to unmute your mic, come on up and welcome in. Hi, guys.
Question. Parker has a question.
I have one too. What is the biggest animal in that Salish Sea?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a good question. What is the biggest animal in the Salish Sea? Although it's very uncommon, I think the basking shark might be the biggest animal that has been seen in the Salish Sea. They can get really, really big. They're the second largest fish and shark on our planet, and they do sometimes come in the Salish Sea.
Basking sharks are the best. It was actually something that I was going to add into that Kahoot question. Everyone should look up basking sharks when they're done this program, because that is an amazing, incredible animal. We find them on the Atlantic coast too. So we actually get basking sharks on both coasts of Canada, which is wild to think about. They're such a magical creature. Guys, I'm going to take a quick question from YouTube. Now, one thing that you can do after this broadcast is we already have more questions than we can possibly answer in the next few minutes. And so Fiona, the Sea Smart team, they love questions. They love hearing from amazing audiences like you guys. And so we're going to make sure, again, that you guys can check out the seasmartschool.com. Check that out. If you want to reach out to me, I can make sure you're connected, get those questions answered after the fact. Maybe we'll create a Padlet together so that we can answer them a little more easily. So I'll get you guys that after this broadcast is done. But till then, Fiona, Mr. McLean's class wanted to know a whole bunch of questions, but let's see, which plastic item is found most often in areas of water that are polluted? No pressure.
Oh, I actually know this one, so no pressure indeed. It is cigarette butts. So what? They have plastic in them? They do. So the filter in the bottom of a cigarette has plastic in it, and this makes it really annoying because it doesn't break down. And as it starts to break into smaller and smaller pieces, it contains a lot of toxins and chemicals. But for like the 5th year running, cigarette butts have been the most common plastic item found on our beaches during beach cleanups. And that's a stat from the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. They're awesome. Check them out as well.
Yes, they are. I was actually going to just pull that up. Shorelinecleanup.org, I want to say, is their thing offhand. I can find that for classes after the fact, but it's one of the great citizen science projects you can do across Canada and the world. Go out, clean up a beach, clean up a shoreline of any kind in a river or stream near you if you're not on the ocean. And that goes a really long way to not only preventing that plastic from entering the ocean, no matter where you're joining from, but it also allows scientists to collect data like that, so we can get that data on cigarette butts. So if you have smokers in your lives, encourage them to put their cigarettes in trash receptacles. I mean, I have smokers in my life, so that's something that I've done since I was a little kid, about the age of our students in these classes. And all those things go a long way. Truly, again, this has been such a fantastic presentation, most importantly because it highlighted all these solutions for teachers and classrooms to use. So if you guys do not feel empowered by the end of this broadcast, you should watch it again, because Fiona shared so much. seasmartschool.com. We're going to get you guys that Padlet. I'm making that up right now. So if you have more questions, lots of opportunity to share that with Fiona in a couple days to come. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask is there like a final message, Fiona, you want to leave with all our students today?
Yeah, I guess overall, I just wanted to say, I know it doesn't feel like a lot if you're just making actions as an individual, but if we all share these actions that we can make as an individual, we can also make a big difference together. So encouraging the people in your lives, your friends, your family, your class, to also take action to reduce and prevent these pollutants from entering our water, we can make waves of change by working together. So that's something that's really cool about the actions that I put in the presentation today, is they might seem insignificant on their own, but together they have the power to make huge amounts of change for the water around us.
Outstanding. Hey, Fiona, I just want to share this before we wrap up the broadcast live for all our viewers at home too. One of the classes had to leave, but before they did, they said this is a really interactive session, one of the very best they've attended, so that's fantastic. A testament to your skill as a dinosaur and then ocean educator, so thank you very much for that.
Awesome.
As you know from your first broadcast with us, what we do to end every session, I'm going to bring in our classes. So Miss Gilman, Miss T, Miss Brown, Miss Quigley, if you guys want to join me in saying a big thank you and farewell to Fiona, you are now all in the broadcast. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.